Hey friends, Patrick McFarland here of the Liberty Weekly podcast with another news update here. Today is Wednesday, March 28th, 2018, and I'm here to talk about Trump's war cabinet and the appointment of John Bolton to the National Security Administrator and what some libertarian types are saying, some of the commentary about this. There's a lot of worry about the omnibus spending bill and how large it was and how big of an increase it was in military spending, as well as social programs, and just the idea that there is no two political party system. There's just one political party system in the United States. But we'll get to that. I think the major concern here is that John Bolton is a war hawk. He supported the war in Iraq and continues to support the war in Iraq, and in fact calls for war pretty much at any opportunity that he gets. So let's dive right in here to the articles and see what people are saying. First article that I have is from Pat Buchanan on his official website. I picked this up off of Zerohedge. But the question is Trump assembling a war cabinet? And it's funny because Pat Buchanan kind of takes the position here that the last man standing, he says here, between the U.S. and war with Iran, may be a four-star general affectionately known as Mad Dog Mattis. And so Pat Buchanan talks about how Mattis is the last member of Trump's cabinet who is or going to temper war or something like that, which we'll get to in a minute, kind of debunking Pat Buchanan's claim about Mad Dog Mattis here. But Buchanan talks about what a lot of the other libertarian types have said, is that John Bolton is a terrible warmonger. He's called for preemptive strikes and regime change in the past. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls Iran a thuggish police state, a despotic theocracy, and the vanguard of a pernicious empire that is expanding its power and influence across the Middle East. He says, let's see, this is still the Buchanan article. He says that Mohammed bin Salman has called the leader of Iran the Hitler of the Middle East. Also, Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has also lambasted Iran. And Nikki Haley has as well. So we have all these influential figures that are calling for war with Iran, who talk bad about Iran. This is nothing new. Also, he just kind of talks about, what would the fallout of that be? Any kind of war against Iran and the prospects of that. So I'll include this article in the show notes page. That is Pat Buchanan from his website. But moving on, the next article we have is by David Stockman, and this was released on Ron Paul's Institute for Peace and Prosperity today. Just before I get into this, I wanted to note that I will be releasing this on my podcast feed. So if you're listening to the audio version, the video version is on my website at libertyweekly.net/62, because this will be episode 62, entitled Trump's War Cabinet ? And I'd encourage you to watch it on BitChute at bitchute.com/libertyweekly, because screw YouTube. But anyways, here's the article, Trump's War Cabinet. Here, I'm going to try and put me in the lower left-hand corner here. Oops, that is wrong. Apologies. Put me in the lower left-hand corner. Jeez. Sorry, guys. Sorry about this. Okay, now you can see me talk. So Trump's War Cabinet and the Fiscal Doom Loop by David Stockman. David Stockman is a great writer. He was the White House budget secretary under Ronald Reagan. I'm sure I got that title wrong. But so David Stockman is talking about how terrible the omnibus bill is, talking about echoing the words of Pat Buchanan that Trump has essentially formed a war cabinet and signed a horrible spending bill that is a warrant for fiscal meltdown, and I would agree with that statement. And he uses this language about a self-fueling doom loop, and he echoes the words, but I think the most important thing that kind of to temper what Pat Buchanan was saying in his article is that David Stockman refers to Mad Dog Mattis as just another one of the war cabinet. And that's down here. This is a direct quote from Mad Dog Mattis. He says, "The first time you blow something away, It is not an insignificant event. That said, there are some assholes in the world that just need to be shot. I come in peace. I didn't bring artillery, but I'm pleading with you with tears in my eyes. If you fuck with me, I'll kill you all. And so that man is in charge of our military. I suppose that's why they call him Mad Dog Mattis. And so this is not good. And the David Stockman talks about how this is unprecedented military spending. It's terrible. We have a war cabinet set up. Mad Dog Mattis is not exempt from this, talking about all the things that Mad Dog Mattis has done. He says, unlike most of the American generals who have been waging and losing pointless wars over the last half century while cheerfully checking the boxes on the way to their post-retirement bonanzas, Mattis never got over it. He blitzed the enemy as an assault battalion commander in the First Gulf War, brought carnage to the Pashtun villages of southern Afghanistan, and obliterated Fallujah in Iraq twice without ever noticing that he was not winning any wars, but just dispensing random high-tech violence at huge cost in blood, treasure, and blowback all throughout the world. And so in this, David Stockman continues. It's a rather long article, but I definitely suggest that you read it. He goes through all of the boogeymen that Trump's war cabinet constantly decry, and those are some of the same actors that we recounted in the Pat Buchanan article. But he goes through and gets rid of that. You know, China's not a threat. He calls China the red Ponzi, which I really appreciate. And so China talks about how Russia's GDP is like the size of Manhattan or something like that, and it's not a very strong country. Also, North Korea has never been any threat, and Iran is never a threat, never the threat that John Bolton and they say that it is. And in fact, he talks about how the U.S. has been screwing with Iran since the 1950s, setting up and supporting the Shah in what was seen as an unlegitimate puppet government that was overthrown in 1979. So we've always been meddling. We've had our hands in Iran. Iran really hasn't given us a threat. He says, and the fact is Iran is not a terrorist state, even if its theocracy falls short of democratic ideals, and even if its leaders do fulminate against the great Satan in Washington. And it's no threat to Lincoln, Nebraska, or Springfield, Massachusetts. And yeah, so I would suggest that everyone read this article. Very frightening, this Trump's cabinet selection that he has, and I really hope it doesn't lead to war. But then we come to this, and this is a sentiment that actually David Stockman echoed, was that on May 12th, that's coming up here pretty soon in the next couple weeks, when the certification of the Iranian nuclear deal compliance will arrive. And there's a report on Zerohedge from Monday saying that Trump is going to scrap the Iran deal on May 12th. And that would be a bad thing, because there's no reason. The UN inspectors have certified that Iran is complying with the nuclear deal, and there's no reason to think why it should be scrapped. They've been complying with it, as I said, and this is very scary, obviously, with all the rhetoric that we recounted against Iran in the Pat Buchanan article here. Next article is just another article from the Ron Paul Institute talking about how John Bolton is just a maniac and one of the most dangerous Americans, quote, I've ever met. That's a quote from Lawrence Wilkerson, who's a former U.S. Army colonel and chief of staff for Secretary of State Colin Powell. And this was part of an interview here, so you can view that. I'll put the link in the show notes page. And talking about war preparations, there is a report on Monday from Zerohedge. I don't know the validity of this report, but it includes pictures. The report is that, so we know that Eastern Ghouta is a suburb of Damascus, the capital city of Syria, and there has been insurgencies, still rebel-held areas within the city, and this article says now Syrian government's forces have now secured most of the Eastern Ghouta enclave, Ghouta, the last remaining rebel-held area near Damascus, the capital and largest city of the Syrian Arab Republic. And Nikki Haley responds to this news, which we know that a lot of the rebel forces fighting against Assad are, in fact, Islamic extremists. They are terrorists. We've been lending support to the fictional moderate rebels. But Nikki Haley says, this is terrible. The terrorists are being cleared from the capital city of Syria. We're getting close to possible peace without war. Obviously, Nikki Haley doesn't like that. So the Washington, she says, remains prepared to act if we must, quote. And so you can get this, but the report is that there are U.S. military vehicles that are going into Jordan. And I'll let you guys explore this, but here are all these mobilizations and troop movements are always connected to like some kind of drill that they're doing. Well, we know that sometimes drills go live, and that's kind of what this article speculates, is that while this is part of a scheduled drill, and the article title is a little misleading. It says war preparations, leaked images allegedly show U.S. military tanks arriving in Jordan. Well, it is part of a scheduled regular show of military force, but sometimes they go live, sometimes they don't. So keep your eye on that. The next one is just the special report from Ron Paul, who thought this was important enough to have a special report with Daniel McAdams talking about how terrible John Bolton is and how alarming it is that he's in the White House now, and that we really need to keep our eyes open. And of course, there's a donation clause here for the important work that Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul are doing. And I think I really do enjoy Ron Paul's work with the Liberty Report. I think it's great that even at his age, because we know that Ron Paul's no young buck, but that even at his age, he's still able to do great work for liberty, and he's focused on foreign policy. And I think just because foreign policy can be so confusing, and it requires a lot of time investment to really understand what's going on and who the major players are. And as a layman, having Ron Paul as that resource is tremendous. And everyone should go, obviously, check out the Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. So that being said, I wanted to, if you want a little more information about how bad John Bolton is, I would point everyone to Kyle Ancelone, who is making a name for himself in the Liberty movement. Scott Horton has, a few months ago, Scott Horton picked up Kyle's show, Foreign Policy Focus. It's on the Libertarian Institute, and one of our friends from the Libertarian Union, Tony Rockamora from Don't Waste Your Hate podcast, ran into Scott Horton at the LP convention in New Jersey, and Scott was joking about how Scott should quit doing his show because Kyle's got his back, and so Scott can retire now because Kyle's doing such great work. But there's a great episode, How Bad is Bolton? Foreign Policy Focus, episode 172, and that's at foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com. That's foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com. Also, Immersion News is Kyle's website, and it is a great resource. I have it on screen here for all you audio listeners of the show, but that's at immersionnews.com, spelled just the way you would think it would be. And there's an interactive map here that Kyle's put together. You can, if you click on a certain area, it'll bring you to stories from that area on the map. And so here's United States. I clicked on it. Here's all the news from the U.S. Here is Syria. Here's the news out of Syria. So it's great. Great how he has it set up there. So in closing here, let's see if I can bring you guys up here. So in closing, I've decided to make some changes to the show that I just wanted to document here. There, for all of my new listeners on BitChute, there is a large backlog of episodes. I've gotten I made a video about Facebook and it got me 80 new subscribers. So for all you new people, thanks for subscribing. I really appreciate it. I have a large backlog of episodes, 60 now. I've almost been doing this for a year, but I put a lot of work into those backlogged episodes. There's a lot of substance there in terms of legal theory and economics. Episode libertyweekly.net/14 was the best first episode, talking about how eugenics and the progressive movement are hand in hand, and a lot of stuff about libertarian legal theory, Lysander Spooner. There's a bunch of episodes, so go explore that at libertyweekly.net/. episodes, I think it is, or just libertyweekly.net. There is a master episode list where you can peruse that, or just look through my BitChute feed. There's a lot of stuff there too. I wanted to pump Mewe. It is called Mewe.com as a valid Facebook alternative, and I suppose I should pump my page here. There is a community. So for all you traditional listeners of my show, the podcast, there is a community forming on Mewe.com of the Liberty Weekly podcast that has been way more successful than any of my Facebook stuff, any of the Facebook communities that I've created already. And it's active. If you go to the groups section, and I'll include a link in the show notes page for this, but if you go to libertyweekly.net/Mewe, that's MEWE, it'll take you to the community. And let's see, there are 94 people now in the Liberty Weekly Mewe group. And the best function of this is that there is a Liberty Weekly podcast chat feature, so you can connect with other listeners of the show. This is so great. Connect with other listeners of the show. We already have a community here if you see me scrolling through all the messages. And I can chat with, I'll pop in there throughout the day. I'll chat with you. We can talk Liberty, ask questions, talk whatever. And there are people that are posting content in the group posts. So there's a community building here, and I'm super stoked about it. Shout out to everyone who's already in the community. I love you guys. I appreciate it. It's awesome. Thank you. I'm so stoked about it. Moving on to the next point I wanted to make. You can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. There's a lot of great bonuses. Access to my meme cache, access to the Rothbard repository that is put on by Daniel and Robert of the Actual Anarchy podcast. And there is early release. There are, early release sometimes and special bonus content that I post, weekly behind the scenes updates, that kind of thing. You can support at different tier levels. I'm sure you all know how Patreon works. Murray Rothbard access, Ludwig von Mises access. There you go. And so you can support me there. Otherwise, my Amazon affiliate link, I really appreciate all that because I can use that money and buy books to help create content for this show. I really do appreciate that. If you go to libertyweekly.net/Amazon, it will take you to right to the Amazon homepage through my link so you can do your regular shopping there. Also, I wanted to comment on the status of the show because I haven't really filled in my audio listeners yet. But I'm going to be doing these short kind of current event things where I talk about, in kind of like a Styx Hexenhammer style, but it'll be just like this where I'm like screen sharing and talking about different, news articles or different issues, maybe, theory and stuff. And then I'm still going to be doing interviews, but it's just that my substantive episodes will appear as special episodes, and they will come whenever I have the time. So the thing with this format that I'm speaking to you through right now is that this is all a one-shot, one-take kind of thing, and it's really easy for me to jump on, record this, throw it up, and just be done. And there's no editing involved. That's the plus. So there's a trade-off of, content that's current and stuff but that's a little sloppier, and I apologize for that, but I'm pretty busy, and I'm trying to manage my workflow. So I just did an interview on Sounds Like Liberty podcast, and that's with Nick and Liz. They're really great. I'm really excited about that interview, so check that out. That's at soundslike.libertypodcast.com. I'll include a link in the show notes page as well, but I'll probably be releasing it as an episode of my own show just to give them some exposure and to have that in a convenient place for you guys as the listener. So so to recap, the new format is shorter episodes and updates like this throughout the week that are unedited, one-shot kind of thing, and then longer specials and interviews when I have time and as they come up. So I would impress that the best place to get this is at BitChute, at bitchute.com/libertyweekly. I think I'm going to be posting these two on YouTube. I'm sorry. I'd love to see BitChute grow, and it is performing much better for me, but there's so much exposure in YouTube that I can't not also post there. And if I'm doing these weekly updates, I don't want to deprive my YouTube audience of these updates. So still figuring out how that works, but I support BitChute over YouTube, please go to bitshoot.com/Liberty Weekly before you go to youtube.com/Liberty Weekly. So apologies for these long announcements at the end, but I really like to stay on the same page as my traditional podcast audience, and I love you guys. You're great. Thank you so much for listening. I'm getting a lot of expansion through Mewe, a lot more attention for the show. I love it. I appreciate it. It gives me fire. So check those things out. I'll include links in the show notes page as well. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, comment, critique, review. Hit the bell icon to receive updates and notifications of all my content. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you again probably later this week.